Good evening once again. Welcome all of you to our live session today, and it's everything about GMAT algebra under 60 minutes. And we'll be, talking to you about the best practices and concepts in the session. So just a bit about what you will learn today. Arvind is the speaker, as you all know. He is our GMAT quant expert, and he will be giving you an overview of GMAT algebra, and he will be focusing on key concepts in equations, inequalities, absolute values, and you will also get to practice questions with him. And the best part is that you can directly ask questions to him during the Q&A session, and I request you all to wait till the end so that we can give you the free goodies that we have in store for you. So that's a bit about what you will be learning today. Before we get started, during the session, please use the chat just like you did now to submit any sort of queries. If you face any technical issues, if you feel that there's an issue with audio or something, you can let us know. We'll try to fix it from our end. And if we have poll questions, please do answer them, and try to be interactive during the session so that, Arvind knows that you are following whatever he's saying. And whatever questions you have with respect to the topic that's being discussed, please post them in the Q&A window. Arun will pick it up during the Q&A session. And after the session, you can ask how many ever questions as you like, and you can clear all your doubts. If anybody has a doubt whether we'll be sharing the recording with you, yes, you will be receiving the recording of the session in a couple of days' time. A little bit about our speaker. He is the quant expert at Crackverbal, and he has the perfect score in GRE quant, and he likes to challenge himself, so he took the GRE again and scored the perfect marks in GRE quant again. And he's also a 96th percentiler in quant on CAT. I don't think I need to say anything more. I'm going to hand over the session to Arvind. Arvind, you're there?
Hey, Rachel. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Good evening to all of you. I'll take over from here, Rachel. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll stop sharing.
I'm the host, so I'll be able to present. All right, people. Good evening to all of you once again. As Rachel has said, this webinar will focus on some important aspects of the algebra section of the GMAT quant section. I'd like to start off by quoting a statement like this. And this is a statement that I believe in personally myself. Real knowledge is about knowing where you're ignorant about, and so that you can work on improving those areas. I personally believe in this. Therefore, as Rachel said, we need to keep challenging ourselves regardless of what role we play, and keep improving on our skills, our knowledge, and everything there is. So hopefully by the end of the session, you will take back certain things that you did not know, and yeah, that's what real knowledge is all about. So to start off with, I'd like to quickly summarize what we'll cover today. We'll learn why it is important to synthesize algebraic expressions, algebraic equations, and inequalities when it comes to algebra questions on the GMAT. We'll learn why it is not a good idea to just plug in numbers alone, right? And expect to get an answer. So we'll learn the importance of synthesizing algebraic expressions and equations. And when it comes to inequalities, we learn certain strategies that can really help you improve your accuracy and improve your confidence, and make inequalities look less harder than it actually is. We'll also try to understand the concept of absolute values in a better way. Absolute values is a little bit of an abstract concept. Many people find it hard to understand absolute values, partly because that's how we learned it in school. So here in today's session, we'll look at a better way of understanding an abstract concept like absolute values. And of course, by the end of this session, you'll definitely have a few takeaways that will really help you improve your performance on the algebra module of the quant section, right? So if you look at the algebra section and ask yourself what is covered in GMAT algebra, you will understand that it's primarily high school level algebra that is tested, nothing higher or nothing lower. And even under high school level algebra, all topics are probably not tested, right? Topics like logarithms or a topic like progressions. Logarithms is not tested. You will not have any log questions. Progressions is tested at a very fundamental, basic level, right? So if you look at 4 or 5 important topics that are tested from algebra on the quant section, one of them is clearly equations. Equations forms a fairly big chunk, and it's obvious, right? Most of the questions in quant require you to form an equation and solve an equation. So therefore, GMAT expects you to know the in and out of equations so that you'll be able to frame them and solve them. You'll also find questions on a topic like functions. You can sometimes find questions on graphs, which is a combination of algebra and geometry. And 2 of the dreaded topics, I should say, many people, many test takers dread these 2 topics, inequalities and absolute values. These are definitely going to contribute a significant number of questions on the quant section. So these are the 5 important topics that are tested from algebra in the GMAT quant section, right? And therefore, these are the topics that you'll have to really prepare well if you want to perform well in the algebra module. Having said that, I think you can expect maybe about 7 to 9 questions from the algebra module, right? Considering all the 5 topics that I've written here, okay? You'll probably get about 3 or 4 questions from inequalities, absolute values, maybe about 3 or 4 from equations, and 1 or 2 from a topic like functions, right? So all in all, you might end up getting about 7 to 9 questions, which is roughly in the range of about 25% to 30% of the total number of questions you will find on the entire section. Remember, the GMAT quant section has 31 questions. So that's a significant chunk. You can't just ignore algebra, right? You'll have to really prepare well for all the topics that I mentioned here. So even under these topics, it's not like you have to be an expert at everything, right? There are certain basic requirements that GMAT has from test takers when it comes to algebra. One of the primary requirements, as I told you, is it tests your ability to synthesize and break down algebraic expressions using a knowledge of certain standard expressions like, okay, it expects you to know some of these identities like a plus b the whole square, a minus b the whole square, let's say a square minus b square, a plus b the whole cube, and so on, right? So your knowledge of these identities is tested definitely in a lot of questions, and your ability to convert a given expression maybe to one of these formats is also tested. You're also tested on what kind of assumptions you make in a topic like equations and inequalities. And unfortunately, a lot of test takers end up making a lot of assumptions, and that's how GMAT creates traps. So that's one aspect that we'll be talking about in more detail when we come to questions here. But yes, the primary idea of doing well in GMAT algebra is to learn how to synthesize algebraic expressions, learn how to learn the strategies to deal with equations and inequalities. But I talked about plugging in numbers. I said plugging in numbers is not the ideal strategy in algebra, right? But it is not, you cannot completely rule out that strategy, right? It's a secondary strategy. After you break down expressions and solve equations, you will definitely be tested on your knowledge of numbers and whether you know enough numbers to plug in the right kind of values to figure out the answer, right? So these are two things that are tested in algebra questions on the GMAT. So how do questions on algebra look? Let's take a few examples. Let's start off with maybe a warm-up problem, right? I'll just run the poll. I want all of you to take, let's say, a couple of minutes. I'll give you 2 minutes. This is a data sufficiency question. I'm sure all of you have heard of DS. Nevertheless, I've given the options here. So take a couple of minutes, solve this, and after that we can go about discussing. I'll just put myself on mute so that you're not disturbed. Anubhav, the screen is already in full screen mode. Thank you. Okay, people, so it's 2 minutes. You can probably start posting your answers now. If you've already done it, great. Otherwise, I'll probably hold on for another 10 seconds so that some of you can decide and mark your answers, please. Okay, sure. Closing the poll now. And I'll present your answers to you so that you can have a look at where your answers stand in terms of a percentage. So 52% of you who polled an answer say it is A for alpha, and 39% say D for delta, right? So this is exactly what I was talking of in terms of biases, right? In terms of certain details that we overlook when we solve questions on a topic like equations. When it comes to a topic like equations, a lot of us have a little bit of complacency saying, okay, this is equations, I know most of the things about equations, right? So equations are a statement of equality between two expressions. So I can say, let's say x plus 2 equal to 2x minus 5, right? So this is an algebraic expression, basically a combination of variables and constants. This is another algebraic expression. And you're making a statement that the expression on the left-hand side, which is called the LHS, is equal to the expression on the right-hand side. So the statement that you made becomes an equation, right? So an equation is basically a statement of equality between two algebraic expressions. And there are certain fundamental characteristics an equation will have, right? For example, the degree of an equation is a fundamental characteristic, a fundamental trait that any equation will have. So for example, in this equation, the degree is 1. So the degree of any equation is the highest power of the variable that occurs in the equation. So there is one variable in this equation and the highest power is obviously 1, right? So equations can be classified based on the degree. They can also be classified based on the number of variables that they have. So an equation like this, let's say, becomes a quadratic, right? So degree of this equation is 2 because the highest power of the variable here is 2. So solving equations, one model of question on equations tests your knowledge of some of these basic characteristics of an equation, right? So I'll ask you a question. I'll post a question now, and I want all of you to think about it and give me an answer, right? All right. So what could be the degree of this equation? As we discussed, the degree of an equation is nothing but the highest power, right? Highest power of any variable that comes in the equation, right? So this is an equation in one variable, x. So what is the highest power of the variable in this equation? Yeah, you can think about it. Give me an answer. You need to start comparing. You need to, this is where your knowledge of numbers comes in, right? So it's just not about variables and expressions. It's also about your ability to deal with numbers, right? So you need to understand that 5 by 3 is the highest power here, right? So the degree of this equation is 5 by 3. All right. So there are certain things that you need to understand. So I'll ask you another question now. If you look at the first equation, can you tell me how many solutions the first equation has? Many of you, most of you will say it has one solution or one root, right? How many roots does the second equation have? So this example, how many roots does the equation have? So the number of roots of the second equation is 2. So there is no concept called maximum 2, Shivam, right? At least when you're attempting an exam like the GMAT, right? When you have a quadratic, it has 2 roots. So we are attempting GMAT quant. We are not getting into absolute mathematics as a subject, right? So you need to study mathematics from the perspective of the GMAT. All right. So how many roots does this equation have, right? If we follow the same approach, can we say this equation has 5 by 3 roots? Can we say that? Does that sound logical? Doesn't, right? You have to understand that one of the fundamental pillars of mathematics is logic, right? You take logic out of mathematics, the entire subject of mathematics falls to pieces, right? So you have to understand that 5 by 3 is a decimal. You can't say there are 1.6 ways of solving a problem. You either have one way or 2 ways, right? So that is where there's a fundamental theorem of algebra you need to know. And that is what is being tested in a lot of problems. All right, so I'll tell you what the fundamental theorem of algebra is, but I'm just giving you a display of what could be one of the models of questions you can expect on equations. Yet another model of questions you can expect on equations. All right, let me write this equation. X plus y equal to 10. Okay, a very simple equation. So how many solutions does this equation have? No solution. Interesting. Shivam, you're wrong again on that, right? So I want you to go through the basics of equations and roots and try to understand it better in terms of details. So this has infinite solutions. Okay, very good. All right. So why does this equation have infinite solutions? The answer is I have more unknowns, correct? I have more unknowns than equations, right? So that's the idea. I have two unknowns, but I only have one equation. So when I have more unknowns than equations, I will always have infinite solutions. And therefore, this equation becomes an indeterminate equation, right? So does it mean that I cannot solve this set of equations at all? There are two answers to that. One is, how can I solve this equation? What is the easiest way of getting a value of x and y, for example here? I have x plus y equal to 10, right? What is the easiest way of solving for x and y? So the easiest way of solving for x and y is to have another equation, right? So you can't just assume values, guys. I mean, you can assume infinite values. That's the reason why we said there are infinite solutions, right? So think a little more before you give an answer, right? I want you guys to think for yourself. So there are two ways. One, if I give you one more equation, right, you can solve for x and y. Okay, that's one way. The other way is to look for constraints, right? Have one more equation. Bhumesh, I agree with you. You can either have one more equation in x and y, or you need to look for constraints. All right, let's go the first way, the first route. You said you want one more equation. I'll give you one more equation. Please solve for x and y, right? So you wanted one more equation. I gave you one more equation. It is not the same. I'm sorry. I disagree. It is not the same. Sorry, it's not the same. If you had said they're identical equations or dependent equations, I would agree, but I will not agree with the fact that it is the same equation. Sorry, these are not the same lines, right? So that is where one word made the difference. Some of you said, I want another equation. I gave you another equation. Whereas, ideally, you should have said, I want another independent equation, right? Or I want an equation that is not identical or similar to the first one. So that's where the minor details make a difference, okay? So if I give you 2x plus 3y equal to 20, right? You'll probably be able to solve the equation. I'm sorry, Shubham, you're wrong again. 2x plus 2y equal to 20 is not a set of parallel lines, okay? So you need to understand that this problem, you had 2x plus 3y equal to 24, and you were trying to find the value of y. Clearly, without any other conditions, it's impossible to find the value of y, right, using this equation alone. But because you are trying to find the value of y, you could have rewritten the equation like 3y equal to 24 minus 2x, right? And you could write y is equal to 24 minus 2x upon 3. So this is the synthesization part. This is how you synthesize equations or simplify them to write it in a form which will help you find out what you're trying to find out. Okay, so this is how I've broken down the question stem. What does this tell me now? It tells me that if I want to find the value of y, I need the value of x. Now, where is the x given to me? X is given to me in the first statement. And because this is a data sufficiency question, I don't have to actually substitute and find the value of y. Since I know x is available, I know the first statement alone is definitely sufficient to answer the question, right? So you can eliminate B for Bravo. C for Charlie, and E for Echo, right? Shubham, I understand what you were telling, right? And that is the reason why I'm telling what you were telling is wrong. All right, coming back, the first statement alone is definitely sufficient, and most of you will get the first statement right. Where a lot of you went wrong with the second statement is you failed to understand that the equation given to you, right, is actually a set of identical equations. If you actually reorganize this equation, right, you'll see that the ratios are the same. The ratio of the coefficients 2 by 18 is 1 by 9, 3 by 27 is 1 by 9, and 24 by 216 is 1 by 9. So a lot of you did not do this. A lot of you went in with the assumption that if I have two variables, I need two equations, right? So these are the kind of small details that you will miss out and get the answer wrong. So you have to understand that in algebra, all equations follow certain basic rules. First rule, number of roots of an equation will always be equal to the degree of the equation. Okay, so if your degree is 1, your equation will always have one root. If your degree is 2, it will always have two roots. If your degree is 3, it will always have 3 roots. So therefore, this should tell you that the degree of an equation is a positive integer value. And that is the reason why your degree cannot be 5 by 3 or 3 by 2, right? Because your degree represents the number of solutions your equation can have. So that's one fundamental rule that is tested in a lot of questions on equations. The second one is the number of unknowns will define the number of independent equations. So if you have two unknowns, you require two independent equations to obtain a definite solution. So a lot of times students don't test for dependency, right? Like some of you did in the previous question, correct? A lot of you went ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't give you the answer in the previous question. The second statement alone was insufficient, right? So therefore, delta is ruled out. Alpha is the correct answer here. So as I said here, some of you did not test for dependency. You said, I see two equations, so I can get the value of x and y. That is not correct. So that's another aspect that is tested very often in questions on algebra. So these are two things you have to keep in mind when it comes to questions on equations. The third thing is with respect to what is called Diophantine equations. So Diophantine equations are tested very often on the GMAT quant section. So what's a Diophantine equation? Let me show you what it is. So, all right, let's say I have an equation like 2x plus 3y equal to 24, right? Something similar to what we had in the first question. And I'll ask you what is the number of solutions for this equation, right? So how many solutions does this equation have? Shivam, you might paste that, but you're wrong again. You're not understanding what I'm saying, so I will leave it at that. All right, guys, so how many solutions does this equation have? 2x plus 3y equal to 24. Infinite, right? Same reason, there are more variables, less equations, right? All right, now, if I tell you x and y are positive integers, okay, then how many solutions will this equation have? Can we solve this? Wow, really infinite again? Interesting. Wow. Is my reaction, first reaction, of course, because it means you've not thought through what you're saying, right? So the fact that x and y are positive integers makes this equation what is called as a Diophantine equation. Okay? So Diophantine equation is basically a linear equation where your solutions are positive integers. So how do we solve this equation? There's a very easy technique to solve this based on the concepts of odds and evens. Of course, you'll not get a unique value for x and y, but you'll get a limited number of solutions. You'll not get infinite solutions. If you observe carefully, 2x will definitely be an even number. 24 is already an even number. So therefore, we can conclude that 3y is definitely an even number. And the only way in which 3y is even will be when y is even. Which means we just have to plug in 3 values for y, because remember 3 8s are 24. Okay, so if I make y as 8, 3y will become 24, and if 3y becomes 24, 2x will become 0, and x becomes 0, which is not allowed because x is a positive integer. And remember, 0 is not a positive integer. So what are the only two solutions I have here? The two possible solutions I have here are y equal to 6, right? So 3y equal to 18, which means 2x equal to 6, x equal to 3, right? So x equal to 3, y equal to 6 definitely satisfies. I can have y equal to 4, which means 3y equal to 12. 2x will be equal to 12, x equal to 6. So that's one more solution. I can have y equal to 2. So 3y equal to 6, which means 2x equal to 18, x equal to 9. So I have three solutions, which are one is y6, x3, second one is y4, x6, third one is y2 and x9. So with additional conditions, you can definitely solve a Diophantine equation if you follow certain basic strategies of odds and evens and the concept of unit digit. Okay, so that's one more model of questions you can expect from equations on the GMAT quant section. Now, when it comes to quadratic equations, there are certain standard approaches of solving quadratics. One of them is factorization. One of them is using the formula. And one of them is to remember the nature of the roots, right? That is where I would say that when it comes to solving quadratic equations, the discriminant has the biggest say in deciding what your strategy should be. Okay, whenever you have a quadratic equation, I would say first find out the discriminant, because you'll know what to do after that. For example, if I give you an equation like this, all right, very simple quadratic equation. What are the roots, or rather what are the factors? How do you factorize this equation? Don't be in a hurry. So how do you factorize this quadratic? So a lot of you are probably trying to find out the factors of 1, how you break down the factors of 1, right? The fact is you cannot factorize this quadratic. You know why? Because if you compare it to the standard form of a quadratic, right? And write down the values. The value of A is 1, the value of B is -1, and the value of C is 4. Okay, let's find out B square minus 4AC, right? B square minus 4AC will be -1 the whole square minus 4 into 1 into 4, right? So this is 1 minus 16, that is minus 15. C is 1, I'm sorry, C is 1. So Okay, nevertheless, that mistake, I don't think it changes our answer anyways. So I think we get b square minus 4ac as minus 3, right? It doesn't change our answer anyways. It is still a negative value. So you know b square minus 4ac is less than 0. So this has imaginary roots and therefore you cannot factorize, right? So the discriminant tells you a lot of things about what you can do with the quadratics, right? So for example, if you have an equation like x minus 3 the whole square equal to 0, right? Many people believe that this has a single root. So you have to understand that when we were in school, we were taught very clearly, at least I remember I was taught very clearly, that when the discriminant is 0, right? When b square minus 4ac is 0, a quadratic equation has something called equal roots, or it's also called double roots, right? So you can't say that it has one solution. It has one value as the solution, but it has two roots, and those roots are called double roots, right? So that's how the discriminant ends up telling you a lot about a quadratic. That's why whenever you solve questions on quadratic equations, you focus on finding out the discriminant first, because it will tell you what exactly to do after that. Whether you have to factorize, whether you have to use the formula, how many roots, how many imaginary roots you will have, and how many irrational roots you'll have. All this will be told by the discriminant. So that's the strategy we follow here when we take up quadratic equations, right? So that's about equations. These are some strategies that we will follow in our algebra sessions also when we solve questions on equations. Moving on to the next topic, inequalities. Before I start with the strategies, I want all of you to go through this problem, solve this. I'll give you 2 minutes on this. And you can take 2 minutes, solve this, and get back with the answer on the poll. All right, people, that's 2 minutes. So the way a lot of you have gone for the different answers, I think shows why inequalities is such a difficult topic, right? And the fact that a lot of you have not even marked an answer even after 2.5 minutes on a 600 level question, maybe a 600 to 650 is what the level is. Definitely not a 700 level question. All right, end of poll. Yeah, exactly, right? Okay, let me make this statement. I want all of you to fill up the blank here for me. I'll make a statement, right? If I have a number that looks like this, okay, an exponential number, x to the power of even, okay, x to the power of even is always dash. I want all of you to fill up the blank. You can post your answers in the chat box. Is always even. Whoa, okay, interesting. Is always positive. Well done. And this is exactly the trap that GMAT sets you, right? So do you want to say 0 power even is also positive? Interesting. That's a new thing I learned today, because according to me, 0 power even is 0. And 0 power 0 is not positive, correct? Yeah. So that is what gets a lot of us into trouble, right? Because I don't know whom to blame it on, right? Because that's how most of us have learned about perfect squares. We always learn to say, or we always learn to say x square is always positive, which is what GMAT exploits, right? X to the power of even is always non-negative. This is how you need to look at it, right? At least this is probably one of your biggest takeaways from today's session, that an even power term will always be non-negative, right? Not always positive. It can be 0. Okay? Remember that. So a big clue is, in this question, there's a big clue. P and Q are both negative, right? So P less than 0, Q less than 0, which means Q square is definitely positive, right? Because Q is not equal to 0. So very often what people do is PQ minus Q square less than 0. People end up taking Q square onto the right side, right? And cancel off the Q, which is okay, right? And P less than Q. So P less than Q, if some of you did this, it is okay because Q is not less than 0. But cancelling of variables is something that I don't recommend, okay? Because it's a bad habit. So P less than Q means what are the options that go out? You can eliminate delta, echo, anything else? But how do we find out the other part, Q square and P square? That is why I say you should never take this route of taking something to the right side. The idea is always to keep the right hand side as 0, okay, and to work with the left hand side. So if you look at PQ minus Q square, you know Q is common, right? I'll come there, Hariteja, I'll come there. I was just pointing out the common mistakes that people do, right? So when you look at the left hand side, you take Q common. If you take Q common, P minus Q is what is left? So Q times of P minus Q is less than 0. We already know Q is less than 0. You have a multiplication of two terms. If you say A into B is less than 0, what do you understand by that? What is the meaning of A into B less than 0? Yes, please. What do you infer from A into B less than 0? Which means one of them is positive and one of them is negative. So the idea of working with inequalities is to work with the signs, not with the values alone. Questions on inequalities test your ability to work with signs, right? So here, you already know that this is negative, Q is negative, and you know the product is negative. So what can you infer from this? You have to infer that P minus Q has to be more than 0. And if P minus Q is more than 0, as Hariteja said, P has to be more than Q, right? P has to be more than Q. Okay, so what happens when you go this route is you end up eliminating the wrong options the wrong way. All right, so the actual options you have to eliminate at this stage are alpha and beta. Clear with this? Clear till now? So now that you know P is more than Q, right? And you know that both of them are negative, what do? You just draw a simple number line. You draw a number line. I will take P as -2 and I'll take Q as -3. So what will be the value of P square? P square will be 4 and Q square will be 9. It is very clear for you, right? That the order is Q less than P less than P square less than Q square. The correct answer is C for Charlie. Aspirant, do you remember what happens when you divide Q on both sides? Right? And I told you it's a very common mistake that aspirants make, pun intended. Do you realize that Q is a negative number? And do you realize that if you divide both sides by a negative number, you have to change the sign? And that is the reason why I'm telling questions on inequalities are all about signs. It's not just about values. Okay, and what you did exemplifies what most test takers will do on inequalities. You know what that is? Most test takers will try to treat inequalities like equations. Okay, on equations, if you had an equation like PQ equal to Q square, or rather PQ minus Q square equal to 0, right? You can write it as PQ equal to Q square and cancel off the Q and say P equal to Q. Happily, no problem. You don't have to worry about the sign. But when it comes to inequalities, signs are important. You have to understand if you divide by a negative number, you have to change the sign, and that's what makes people make mistakes. And when do mistakes happen? Right? Mistakes happen when you're dealing with variables. You had variables here. Method 1 was okay if you remember to change the sign, but how many of us will remember it, correct? Under pressure is what you have to figure out, right? And that is why breaking down the expression was a much better method, because then you're sure of everything. Okay, so you have to stop treating inequalities like equations. Inequalities are a different beast. They have their own rules. You break those rules, they will pay you back with mistakes. That's how they work. And especially if you have a variable, you have to understand a variable can be positive, negative, or 0. That's the reason why they're called variables. So you can't just cross multiply, cancel, square, reciprocal unless you know the sign, right? If you know the sign, you can do whatever you want. If you knew that Q was positive, you could have done anything that you wanted. But the problem here was Q was negative, right? And there is a certain property in inequalities which helps you combine inequalities. We'll take that up when we actually do the session on inequalities. And you also saw how I use the number line, right? After I found out that P is more than Q, I used the number line, plugged in simple values, and solved the question. So using the number line is a very important part of your strategy on solving inequalities questions. When it comes to quadratic and cubic inequalities, we have a very useful method which is called the wavy curve method. It helps you solve quadratic inequalities in a jiffy, in less than 30 seconds. We will discuss it when we come to quadratic inequalities in our actual sessions. All right. Moving on to absolute values. So I'll again ask you a question, and I want you to all to think and answer my question, right? So mod of x is always dash. Okay. So a lot of you actually started becoming more careful now, right? Because you know that I'm setting up traps. Correct. Mod of x is always non-negative, right? We have learned it in a very wrong way that mod x is always positive. That's not correct. Mod x is a non-negative value, just like x squared. Okay. So get rid of that misconception that you have that mod x is always positive. Sorry, mod x is non-negative because mod x can be 0. What is mod x? What is mod x? Many of us remember this definition: mod x equal to x when x is more than or equal to 0. Mod x equal to minus x when x is less than 0. We remember this definition. And most students I have seen, right, will end up using this in all questions. They beat this to death. And in turn, the question beats them to death. Because this is not the best strategy in all questions, right? It is a good strategy when it comes to absolute value equations. But if you start using this definition when you're solving inequalities, you're in trouble, right? So that's where you have to understand mod x is the distance function. So mod x represents the distance of x from 0, right? It's like a function, it's like a machine, right? Look at it as a machine. You have mod x inside. What is the work it does? It calculates the distance of the number x from the number 0 on the number line. So for example, if you give a number like 5, right? The function will calculate the distance of 5 from 0 and give the output as 5. On the other hand, if you give the input as minus 5, it will again calculate the distance of minus 5 from 0. And we all know that the distance of minus 5 from 0 is 5 units, not minus 5, because distance cannot be negative. So regardless of whether you give 5 or minus 5, the output will always be non-negative, right? That's what mod x does. And this is how you have to remember mod x. Just don't remember the definition and beat it to death in all questions. You can actually use the distance concept to make your problem solving a lot easier. And we'll show you in some examples today. So you have to remember that the absolute value of a number represents its distance from another reference value. And the reference value is typically 0. You also have to understand that the modulus function always gives you a non-negative output. Whether you give a positive input or a negative input or a 0 as the input, the output will always be non-negative. And therefore, remember that the smallest value that a modulus can give you is 0. It can never give you a negative value. Just like x squared. When you think of absolute values, right, just think of x squared, because both of them behave similarly. All right, so we'll discuss more about absolute values in our actual session on absolute values, but I'm just giving you some important properties that can help you understand absolute values better, and you can actually come well prepared to the absolute value session. Okay, so with that, I hope all of you are ready to solve a few examples back to back now. right? One after another. I have about 3 or 4 questions for us to solve. It'll take us about 10 minutes, right? So we'll wrap this up by about 8:40. Okay? All right. So let's start with the first one then. Question number 1. I'll give you all 2 minutes. Solve this question, poll the answer, and then we discuss. Okay, people, it's time. All right, I'm closing the poll in another 5 seconds so that we discuss. All right, time up. It was actually not that difficult a question. A lot of you missed out on giving an answer, right? It's not actually a difficult question. Let us see how to go about solving it. What are the couple of methods that we can adopt? One method is obviously using variables, right? We can have night crew and we can have day crew. We can have number of boxes loaded, number of boxes per worker. I'm sure a lot of you took the day crew as X and the night crew would be 3/4 of X. This is typically what a lot of test takers do. Then we say, remember, these are the number of boxes that every worker is loading, right? Then we have number of workers. Night crew has 4/5 as many workers as the day crew. So if the day crew is Y, has Y workers, the night crew will have 4/5 of Y workers. So therefore, the total number of boxes will obviously be the product of these two, number of boxes per worker into number of workers. So if you multiply 3/4 of X with a 4/5 of Y, the total number of boxes loaded by the night crew will be 3/5 of XY. And the total number of boxes loaded by the day crew will obviously be XY. So what is the total of the boxes loaded by the two crews? Obviously the sum of these two, right? So the LCM is 5. So you'll have 3XY plus 5XY. That is 8XY by 5. So 8xy by 5 is the sum total, the grand total of the number of boxes loaded by the two crews. The question is, what fraction of this, right? What fraction of 8xy by 5 was loaded by the day crew? Obviously, out of 8xy by 5, how many did the day crew load? They loaded xy. So this is the fraction we are looking for. So we cancel this off. This goes to the numerator. It becomes 5 by 8. So the answer here is E for echo. Is this the most efficient method? I'm sorry to say that this is not the most efficient method, but unfortunately, this is the most adopted method. Most people will do this. If I were you, I would do this. Instead of x, I would take 4. So therefore, this would become 3. So 4 boxes every worker in the day crew, 3 boxes every worker in the night crew. Here, I would take 5. So obviously, this would become 4. So what is the total number of boxes that the night crew added? 12. What is the total number of boxes that the day crew added? 20. Total 32. Question is, out of the 32, how many did the day crew load? So obviously that is 20 by 32, that's 5 by 8. Probably took me half the time that it took in the variable approach. So one of the strategies that we follow in equations problems, in word problems is, if there are too many variables, we plug in simple values instead of having to deal with variables all the time. Clear with this? Clear with both the approaches? Any questions? So you can feel free to tell me which approach you liked. And if you liked it, I would say that you should start doing it more often, right? Rather than just depending on variables all the time. Good, well done, Anubhav. What about the others? Any doubts or questions or difficulties? Feel free to ask questions, people. Okay, so I take that as a no, and therefore move on to the next question. Question number 2, which is a beautiful question on inequalities. Okay, it's a DS question. Be careful. There's a lot of data given. Make good use of the data. 2 minutes. Okay, people, that's 2 minutes. All right, last 5 seconds before I close the poll. Okay, time up. Okay, a lot of you have given B as the answer, and B is definitely the right answer. So what happens with inequalities is, um, before learning the rules, a lot of us go about applying whatever we know recklessly. But after learning the rules, right, a lot of us tend to become very conservative, right? So Arvind said, don't cancel off variables, don't cross multiply, so we don't cross multiply. But Arvind also said that if you know the signs, you can do practically whatever you want, right? And do we know the signs here? We definitely know the signs. We know x and y are positive. And what's more, they are positive integers. That's a great condition to have. So look at this question now. What is the question? Is 2 plus x upon 3 plus y more than 2 plus y upon 3 plus x? This is the original question stem. If this condition was not given, you could not do anything other than bringing this to the left hand side. But because this is given, you can now go ahead and cross multiply, because you know all the numbers are positive and the inequality sign will not change. It will remain greater than. So what happens to this question now? It becomes, is 2 plus x into 3 plus x more than 2 plus y into 3 plus y? That becomes the question now. Right? So let's do it here where we have more space. So what is the question now? The question is x square plus 5x plus 6 more than y square plus 5y plus 6? That's the question. So you see how I'm focusing on breaking down the question stem to a very simplified form. I can cancel off the 6. I'll bring everything to the left hand side, keep the right hand side 0, because that's a strategy. So is x square minus y square plus 5x minus 5y more than 0? That's the question now. X square minus y square is x minus y into x plus y. You have a x minus y common here. So if you take x minus y common, here you're left with x plus y. Here you're left with 5. So this becomes the question. Now we already know x plus y plus 5 will definitely be positive. So what is the question now for us? The question that we have to answer is x minus y more than 0? That is the question. So this is a very important strategy in inequalities, breaking down the question stem and converting it into a simpler version of itself. Now look at this question and tell me, where do you get an answer? Do you get an answer with this? You can't, because x can be 2, y can be 1, or x can be 1, y can be 2. So the first statement alone is definitely insufficient. So alpha and delta can be ruled out. X more than y is exactly what we're looking for, which means the second statement alone is definitely sufficient to answer the question. So B for Bravo is the correct answer. Right? So this is how inequalities question should be solved, by synthesizing the question stem and utilizing the basic properties. So here I utilize the basic property that if you multiply both sides by a positive number, your inequality sign will not change. Okay, that is the property I used to break down the question stem. Yes, please. Questions or doubts? I wish there was a rule book for me to say how we know it's going to be simplified, right? But unfortunately, there is no rule book like that. And therefore you will have to learn it the hard way. It comes by practicing questions. When I say it is a strategy, you have to understand that it is a new strategy for you, which will take time to learn. And that answers your question, Bhumesh. This is a very time-taking way. You have to understand that GMAT is testing your time management skills. So a lot of people feel that DS questions are all about the statements. So what do? They spend the maximum time on the statements. Whereas the maximum time has to be spent on the question stem. I agree with you. I spent almost 2 minutes on the question stem. How much time did I take after that to get to an answer? Less than 30 seconds. So you're still starting off with the preparation, right? This is not the time for you to talk about time consumption. This is the time for you to learn strategies, time to learn techniques to solve a problem, and internalize it, make it muscle memory. Time will automatically take care of itself. Okay, any other questions? All right, guys. Question number 3. Here we go. I'll give you 2 minutes. Okay, people, that's time. Well done. Okay, this seems to be, a lot of you seems to have thought through your solutions here. Some of you have, of course, fallen for the trap. All right, time up. Okay, so these are the results. So 70% delta. Some of you have fallen for the trap. Charlie, Bravo is a very bad answer, I would argue, right? As I've been telling, right, when you have an equation, learn how to synthesize it or learn how to manipulate it. Now, you know y plus mod y is 0. Can I take this to the right side now and write it as mod y equal to minus of y, right? So mod y equal to minus of y. Why did I do this? Because I know I'm trying to find something about y. And I know that mod y is always non-negative. So if the left-hand side is non-negative and you're telling that it's an equation, it means minus y should also be non-negative because it's an equation, of course. And how will minus y be non-negative? You can't have a positive value for y. You can't say y is 2. Minus 2 is not non-negative, right? So alpha and bravo are straight away ruled out. And you can't say y should always be 0. 0 is one of the possible values. It's a must-be question. And you can't say y should always be negative, right? Because y can be 0 also. So Charlie and Echo are ruled out. The correct answer here is D for delta, which is exactly what we are looking for. We are telling that y has to be negative or 0 so that this right-hand side becomes either 0 or positive. Yeah, I hope this was understood. Another way you could solve this was by taking values. You could plug values from each range. So for example, you could plug in y equal to 1 and see what happens here, right? You could plug in y equal to 0. You could plug in y equal to minus 1. Then you could plug in y equal to minus 1 or 0 and see which one held true all the time. Okay, that is one way, but I would not recommend that way because it's very time consuming. It can often leave you, confused as well. Yeah, correct. If y is positive, then y minus y will be negative. That's why I said the first answer option to go out was A for alpha, correct? Yeah, exactly what I said, right? Any other questions, people, on this problem? So here I utilize the basic property of modulus, and the basic property of modulus is a mod is always non-negative. That's what helped you solve this problem, right? Anubhav, I already explained how both can be equal. It is given. This is the data given. You can't question the data, right? This is the data given to you. The question says y plus mod y is 0, from which we said mod y equal to minus y. If you ask me how can they be equal, you're asking me how is the data possible? The data is given to us. This is the data given. And using this data, we have to find out which option is true always. So tell me, is option A always true? Can you say y will always be positive? Will it always satisfy this equation? And that's why you have to understand that it's a must be true question, right? So you can't say y always has to be positive. In fact, it can't be positive. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, last question, guys. And the last 2 minutes for all of you. Here we go. Okay, all right, time up. Okay, I see some distress answers coming up as the time is running out. So many of these answers are probably distress answers, or you have really worked well through it. One of them is true. Okay, the last 5 seconds, probably, before I close the poll. Time up. All right. 35% say B for Bravo. All right. 24% A for Alpha. 18% D for Delta. And 24% E for Echo. That's exactly why it's important to learn how to break down the question stem. Many of you didn't do that. And if you still have a thought process that it takes a lot of time, I'm better off working with the statements, I'd really want you to reconsider your stance. Is mod of x minus 1 less than 1? Right? So that is where I want you to understand what is mod of x minus 1. Mod of x minus 1 is the distance of x from the number 1. Right? So you're asking yourself, is mod of x minus 1 less than 1? That's what you're asking yourself. So what are you asking yourself? You're asking, is the distance of x from the number 1, right? Is this less than 1 unit? Is what you're asking yourself. Okay? So let's draw a number line. You have the number 1 here. So 1 is your reference. Okay? And you want this number x to be at a distance of 1 unit from 1. So till where can I go? So this is 1, right? So till where can I go with x? What are the numbers? What are the extremes for me? I can go till 2 on the right side, and I can go till 0 on the left side, right? But can I include 2? I can't include 2. Can I include 0? I can't include 0 because I want the distance to be less than 1 unit. So what is the actual question we are trying to answer? We are trying to answer whether x is in between 0 and 2. So is x between 0 and 2, right? That is the question, right? It's a very simple question now. Look at how it was and look at how it has become now, okay? It looked a very complicated question. Now it's a very simple question. All right, look at the first statement. X minus 1 the whole square less than or equal to 1. So x minus 1 the whole square less than or equal to 1. So this is a quadratic inequality. So how do we solve this? Very simple. You take the 1 to the left side. So it becomes x minus 1 the whole square minus 1 less than or equal to 0. So this is in the form of a square minus b square. What is a square minus b square? A minus b into a plus b. Okay, so this becomes x minus 2 minus 1 plus 1 can be cancelled into x is less than or equal to 0. So what will be the range that satisfies this inequality? There's a certain technique called the wavy curve technique, which will help you find the range. So there are two numbers here. One of them is a 2 and the other one is a 0 because you have a x minus 0, right? You have a less than inequality here. So the range that will satisfy this inequality is between 0 and 2 included. So according to the first statement, x definitely lies in between 0 and 2, but the problem is it can be equal. Our question is it between x 0 and 2 without being equal to 0 and 2? And that is why the first statement alone is insufficient, because it can be equal to 0 or 2. That's where most of you miss the plot. And that's where some of you marked alpha. That is wrong because the equality is there. Okay. Next, second statement, I don't have space here, so I'll just shift to the whiteboard, right? Pardon me here. So I have x square minus 1 more than 0. This is nothing but x minus 1 into x plus 1, a square minus b square, a minus b into a plus b. Again, the wavy curve method, there is a root of minus 1, there is a root of 1, and we have a greater than symbol. When we have a greater than symbol, this range or this range will satisfy the inequality. So x can be here or x can be here, which means x is less than minus 1 or x is more than 1. Using this information, can we answer the question? We definitely cannot answer the question whether x is between 0 and 2. It may be, may not be. That's why B is incorrect. But when we combine the statements, what is the common range for us? The common range is definitely 0 to 2. But the problem with this range is the equality. The equality is still a problem. That is why even after combining, C for Charlie is not correct, E for echo is the correct answer. Because even after combining, we don't know whether x is equal to 0 or more than 0. All right, this is a slightly challenging question. It had to be challenging because it was the last one. And I also wanted to showcase some of the techniques like the wavy curve technique and how to utilize the distance concept in solving an absolute value problem. You'll learn more of this when you come to the actual session on absolute values. So don't worry if you do not understand it fully, right? Correct. So statement 2 does not have the greater than or equal to sign. Anubhav, just hold on to your question, right? So you can probably come back to this question in the Q&A session, right? Just hold on to your question for a moment, right? So guys, so summarizing, if there are like 3 or 4 points that I want you to remember from this session, when you're dealing with equations, always remember to check for dependency of equations. Don't try to solve them. Check whether they're dependent equations or not. If they are dependent, you cannot solve them. Try to solve them only when you figure out that they are independent equations. Okay? When you're solving quadratic equations, try to find out the discriminant. That will set the tone in terms of telling you what to do. When it comes to inequalities, try to work with the signs. Don't deal with magnitudes alone. Just don't deal with numbers. Try to work with the positives and the negatives. And when you're dealing with absolute values, try to work with the distances. Remember, the absolute value of x is nothing but the distance of x from the number 0. And also remember, absolute value of a number is always non-negative. Okay? So these are like 3 or 4 points that you can write down somewhere in a book and keep them handy, and maybe look at them whenever you're solving questions on equations, inequalities, and absolute values. All right, guys. So I will hand this over to Rachel now.
Thanks a lot, Arvind. So before we get to the Q&A session, a couple of things from our end. So a little bit about Crackable. We ensure that we provide in-depth delivery of foundational concepts in every one of our courses. Like you've seen the session that Arvind took just now. The classes that we conduct, the live sessions that we conduct are much more detailed, and the faculty members here ensure that you understand the concept in and out, and you can always reach out to them for queries and all that. And we also have multi-level test performance analysis, which will help you understand where you stand in terms of your GMAT prep. And we also have the support and assistance from our end all the time. You can reach out to our delivery team and the support team anytime once you've taken up our course. Arvind, if you could move to. Right. So we don't believe in, one size fits all the concept at all. So that's the reason why we have different GMAT prep courses that you can choose from. So the GMAT on demand that you see here is a course in which you can take the entire prep at your own pace. If you're a working professional, this is something that you can, really make use of. Whereas if you like to attend live at home sessions during the weekends, you can take the GMAT live at home course, wherein our faculty members will be, taking sessions over the weekend and you can attend them. The GMAT Score Up is an advanced course wherein if you are stuck at, let's say, a 650 or a 600 score, we'll help you with strategies and concepts so that you improve your score above that and achieve your target score. GMAT one-on-one is more like a personal tutoring session where you have tutoring sessions with our faculty members personally. It will not be a classroom or a group session at all. When it comes to MBA applications, we have the given services, like we have MBA applications which includes shortlisting your B school and then resume coaching, feedback sessions and everything. And interview prep contains helping you prep for the interviews at different B schools, because we have specific mentors for each B school who will help you out depending on your choice of the B school itself. So this is what you will receive once you purchase the course, which is on demand and live. In on demand, which is the first course that I mentioned, where you can take the course at your own pace. You get 80+ hours of on demand videos. You get to test your concepts. You can connect with our team and the faculty members to clarify your doubts and questions and all that. And whereas when it comes to live at home, you get to attend 10 weekends of live sessions, and wherein they deep dive into concepts. And you also get OG video guide solutions. So other than that, we have the 24/7 support wherein they will help you out if you have any queries, and we also provide resources and guides to help you out. We also make suggestions, and you also get to be a part of every single session that we conduct. I'm sure a lot of you would have come across the success stories on YouTube or on our website, but just in case you have missed it, you can check it out here. You can see where all our students have gotten to and the kind of scores that they have got. So if you feel that you want to know more about the GMAT journey or the MBA application journey that they all have had, you can visit the link that I provided in the chat window. So the GMAT algebra class you attended today is we were just focusing on basics. And if you wish to join our actual sessions, that is the live at home sessions completely, you can I'm posting our contact number in the chat window. You can just leave a WhatsApp message, and my team member will get back to you and help you out with how to go about registering for the session. And if you would like to see how the our classes are, you can join our Kickstarter course, wherein you can gain access to key GMAT course videos. You get free downloadable checklists. You can you get a bit of a taste of how the OG Guide solutions will be, and you get templates and cheat sheets to crack the GMAT also. So if you wish to register for the GMAT Kickstarter course, which is a free course that we provide, you can click the link that I've posted in the chat window, and then you can register and you can join, and our support team will reach out to you and tell you how to go about it. So that will help you understand how how to go about it. Yeah, I think we can have the questions now. So if you guys have any questions, you can post it in the Q&A window, and Arvind will be taking it up. I think there's one question in the chat window about offering discounts for MBA application services. I'd request you to reach out to us, either leave a message, WhatsApp message in the given number. And once you discuss with the team, they will be able to tell you how they can help you out. I am not in a position to answer that question. Sorry.
All right, people. So if there are any questions related to the concepts, the strategies that we discussed today, please feel free to post them in the Q&A window, preferably, so that it becomes easy for me to handle them, right? If any of you have a doubt with any question, you can post that as well, and we can go about discussing. And I have about 5 to 7 minutes to take up questions, so feel free to post any questions that you may have. So Hariteja, do you remember the first example problem that we solved? 2x plus, I think 3y equal to 24. So were we able to solve that question using the second statement alone? So if I go back to that question, I'll probably try to go back to that question now. Yes, please. So were we able to solve the question using the second statement alone? You there, Hari? Why were we not able to solve the question using the second statement alone? Because the second statement gave us an equation which was dependent on the first. What are dependent equations? Dependent equations are the set of equations which are going to give you, or which are going to bring you to the same situation. So second equation here is actually the first equation multiplied by 9. So that is the reason why you have to check dependency of equations before trying to solve them. So would it make any sense for you to invest your time in solving this set of equations and later realizing that it was not solvable? No, right? That would be a bad investment of your time. So therefore, you do it first. You first check for dependency and solve it only when they are independent. Next question, please. So I think Anubhav, you had a doubt with one of the last problems, right? If I'm correct, that's correct. So I'll probably go to the last problem and shift to that screen. So you have to understand that the second statement says x square minus 1 is more than 0. And the solution for that, the solution for the inequality given in the second statement is x more than 1 or x less than minus 1. Now, if you know x is more than 1, can you say it is always between 0 and 2? You can't. So having an inequality here does not change the fact that it is still insufficient. Anubhav, I hope that answers your question. Yes, people, you have another couple of minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, so that if you have any questions, you can post them in the Q&A box or the chat box. That shouldn't be a problem. Okay, people, if there are no other questions in that case, it's a wrap then from my end. As Rachel said, these are some of the channels through which you can reach out to us. Make note of our number, our WhatsApp number. You can WhatsApp us your requirement, or you can send us an email. You can find us almost on every social media channel: LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Telegram, and Insta. Subscribe to our YouTube channels, to our social media channels, and get access to some of our free content. Hope to see you on another webinar. Till then, take care and stay safe. Good night, people.